Donald Trump has put all of his trade tariffs on hold, and he's focusing everything now to wage a trade war against the Chinese Communist Party. And look, the stock market also just skyrocketed after this. In other news, New York City is being told to return about $106 million in money that was given to them from FEMA, not for disaster relief, but to use for illegal immigrants. And also, meanwhile, the United States actually managed to cut the cost of eggs that were skyrocketing, but you might have noticed some companies just decided to keep the prices where they were, and that's very high. And now the Department of Justice is investigating them. And also, there are new reports which apparently had been hidden from the American people going back to 2022, and they show that American troops may have gotten infected with COVID-19 when they were in Wuhan, China back in 2019. I'll be talking about these topics and more today. Let's get started. Now, look, first of all, folks, the stock market has boomed, in case you haven't seen it. Trump put a pause on tariffs on pretty much all countries if they're looking to make a deal. The only ones that retaliated are China and Canada. And he's also shifting his focus now to fight a global war, on trade at least, against the Chinese Communist Party. Now, look, this started with a post from Trump, and he wrote on Truth Social, quote, "This is a great time to buy, DJT." And a lot of people said, what do you mean it's a great time to buy? The stock market's not looking so hot. You're waging a trade war. And then he did something else. You know what he did? This. Not long after he made that post, and this was the big one, this caused an absolute surge in the markets. And this one also kicked off what is likely going to be a trade war that is going to determine the final winner and loser in the global economic battle between the United States and the Chinese Communist regime. This is what Donald Trump wrote that changed everything. He said this, quote, "Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charged to China by the United States of America to 125% effective immediately." And he added, at some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including the Departments of Commerce, Treasury, and the USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at my strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a substantially lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%. So he said this is effective immediately, meaning all the tariffs on all these countries around the world reduced to about 10%. That's still pretty dang high, but it's better than what they were having before. And Trump says, thank you for your attention to this matter. And the trade war with the CCP is now on, and everybody else is invited to come to the table within these 90 days to make new deals. Now, this had an immediate, shocking impact. All those investors who dropped their stocks are probably wishing they had not done that. Because just as an example, just one, the NASDAQ surged almost 10% immediately. And it's gone up since then. Now, this marked its best day since October 2008. And this was just across the board. It was across the board, at least in the US. The sea of red turned into a sea of green. And this also means there's a 90-day window for most countries in the world to come to the table and make a deal so they can avoid detrimental tariffs. Even the penguins, right? And they have a chance right now, and the only country that is not being offered that deal is China. The CCP is basically being isolated on the global stage. And while Trump is trying to win new trade deals with everybody else, he's saying, look, you're choosing a side right now. Are you with the CCP or are you with the United States? These are the two directions that the entire world is now having to choose between. Now, like according to Treasury Secretary Bessent, this was actually the plan from the very beginning. This is what Trump was working to do and saying behind closed doors when this whole thing started. It was a ruse. It was the plan all along. They're actually saying this. They're saying the Chinese Communist Party fell into this trap. They knew it would react this way. They knew this would happen. And he says behind closed doors, this was the plan. This is him explaining it while taking questions from reporters outside the White House. Watch.
This was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. And that, you might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate. Things will turn out well.
Now, it wasn't just the Treasury Secretary either. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also repeated this right alongside him. Watch.
I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the Secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
You hear that? They're calling the United States, not China. And they're saying also this was the plan the entire time. Now, believe it or not, right? But I will add to this. I said this yesterday. Remember, I showed Tablet Magazine articles on it. From a certain standpoint, it was actually apparent. I noted this. A few other analysts noted it. The Chinese Communist Party has been the biggest violator of trade laws across the board. It's the worst abuser of unfair trade deals. This has been known for decades. It's the intellectual property theft, the gray markets, the debt traps, the heaps and heaps of bad deals over the decades that gave it a global artificial advantage. And changing that whole shift in the global markets, that means the United States can't just do it by going after the CCP. If this was just an America versus China, trade war, we'd probably lose. It's about the roots the CCP has built in almost every country on the face of the planet. You need to address the entire system and also get some of those factories back to the U.S., like from Canada, for example. And all those countries, what's happening? Well, they are now all lining up for new deals with the United States, while the CCP is basically assuring that what looks like a complete economic decoupling is now taking place. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick also noted this. He wrote on X, quote, "Scott Bessent and I sat with the president while he wrote one of the most extraordinary truth posts of his presidency. The world is ready to work with President Trump to fix global trade, and China has chosen the opposite direction." Now, Senator Rick Scott of Florida also wrote, quote, "Communist China has chosen to be our adversary. Every American family and business should stop buying anything made in communist China and buy American instead." And the general theme going around is that Trump did basically, whether you agree with this plan whether you agree this was the plan all along or not. He set up a trade war. Then he turned this into a global battle of literally everyone versus the CCP. That's how he set this up. Now, this could get much bigger also. Canadian businessman, TV personality Kevin O'Leary, he was speaking on CNN, and he argued the U.S. tariffs on China should actually go higher. Now, Trump has them right now, again, 125%. O'Leary said that's not enough. He's suggesting 400% tariffs. And as somebody who does business in China, this is not a guy who's just on the sidelines. He suggested he and others are fed up with the way the Chinese Communist Party does business because they take advantage of everything, they rip everyone off, and he explains exactly what they deal with. Watch.
104% tariffs on China are not enough. I'm advocating 400%. I do business in China. They don't play by the rules. They've been in the WTO for decades. They have never abided by any of the rules they agreed to when they came in for decades. They cheat, they steal IP. I can't litigate in their courts. They take product, technology. They steal it, they manufacture it, and sell it back here.
What would that
I
look
want
like?
Xi on an airplane to Washington to level the playing field. This is not about tariffs anymore. Nobody has taken on China yet, not the Europeans, no administration for decades. As someone who actually does business there, I've had enough. I speak for millions of Americans who have IP that have been stolen by the Chinese. I have nothing against the Chinese people. They brought great literacy, art, and tech to the world. The government cheats and steals, and finally, an administration, you may not like Trump, you may not like his style or his rhetoric, finally, an administration that puts up and says enough. 400% tariffs tomorrow morning. He'll tell you why. Xi can only stay the supreme leader if people are employed. If we wipe out any business there, because we are still 39% of all consumables on Earth and 25% of the world's GDP, America is the #1 economy on Earth with all the cards. We will not have that forever. It's time to squeeze Chinese heads into the wall now.
Well, hold on.
Look, I'd say he's totally right. The United States holds the cards on this. And Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP, his control of China is really delicate right now. He is not in a strong state. And this also ties into what I've been saying. The CCP abuses everything, including its own people. All countries are being abused by bad deals with the Chinese Communist Party. Every business that's there gets abused by the CCP. With the tariffs, the big issue for China is not imports, though, it's exports. They need to sell their stuff to other countries. And Treasury Secretary Bessent explained this as well when speaking with the press. Watch this.
As I said, we've given 90 days, and the only certainty we can provide is that the U.S. is going to negotiate in good faith, and we assume that our allies will too. And in terms of certainty, we will see what China does. But what I'm certain of is that what China is doing will affect their economy much more than it will ours, because they have an export-driven, flood the world with cheap export models, and the rest of the world now understands, because when we put up our tariff wall, those exports were already flowing to the rest of the G7 and to the global south.
Now, on the point of China, the CCP is not showing any signs they want a deal. In fact, they're actually doubling down right now even more. And so now, look, we get to sit back and watch all of this unfold. And also, other countries are saying they're not going to side with the CCP. The Chinese Communist Party has been trying to go to other countries, Australia, Europe, and they're saying, side with us, join us to fight the United States. And everybody's saying, no, America's my best friend, not you. And that's the place the CCP is now finding itself on this entire global battle, including in its own backyard with South Korea, for example, with Vietnam, with Japan. It's not looking so hot for them, maybe even Russia. We'll see. And look, related to these tariffs, House Democrats are taking actions to force a vote to block Trump's tariffs. Epoch Times said this. A group of House Democrats have moved to force a vote on a resolution to block President Donald Trump's reciprocal global tariffs. It said Representative Gregory Meeks, Democrat of New York, Rick Larson, Democrat of Washington, Richard Neal, Democrat of Massachusetts, on April 8th introduced the measure which would nullify the emergency authority Trump cited to enact tariffs. It says the measure has an additional 23 co-sponsors. When it will be voted on is to be determined, and it notes, quote, by implementing these tariffs, Trump has now imposed the largest and most regressive tax in modern history. Again, they say that tariffs are basically taxes on goods. And they say it sent the stock market into its worst plunge since COVID and is risking a global recession, they said in a statement. And they add, these tariffs are nothing more than a sales tax on American families, driving up prices on everything from groceries to cars. It notes that Meeks and the other Democrat members of Congress say that Trump has no emergency authority to enact the tariffs. Now, look, to be clear on this, it's not quite clear yet if they're going to continue pushing for this. Right now, the tariff war has basically shifted to a trade war specifically with the CCP. Keep in mind, the China issue is relatively bipartisan. Not totally, but relatively. Democrats and Republicans are generally pretty aligned on standing up against the CCP. So maybe they'll cancel it, we don't know. But it's also possible they could move forward with this vote. And it's not clear whether the support is there right now to actually get this passed. It might not be, actually. The other side of this whole trade war also is that Trump's tariffs on most countries in the world, again, they're not gone. He put them at 10% for 90 days. 10% for 90 days while he fights it out with the CCP. After 90 days, well, they have, again, 3 months to make a deal. After that, they go back to the old levels. Although, look, the other side is some members of Congress, even if they're generally opposed to tariffs, they also might not want to interfere with what's happening right now, which is basically a huge trade war between almost the entire free world and the CCP, with the backdrop of Trump using the 90-day trade window to renegotiate basically all of our major trade deals. This is a 3-month window to renegotiate everything. And I've said before, this is one of Trump's tactics. I don't know if, again, they say this was planned the whole time, but this is how Trump usually does things. He does something extra harsh. He, again, negotiates beyond the boundary of where you would normally negotiate. He lets them feel the pain, lets them panic, lets them freak out, and then he pulls back. And then he says, come to the table, make a deal, or it gets the hose again. You know what I mean? He basically does that. And it seems that's what he's doing right now. He, again, made huge tariffs on these countries, detrimental, destroy your economy tariffs. Every country was freaking out. He said, okay, first come, first serve for negotiations. It might take months, but get in line. And then, of course, countries were lining up. It was looking like for the next year, he was going to decimate their economies. Then what happened? Put it on pause, 90 days, come and make a deal. And what's happening? They're lining up to make deals. Now look, in other news, New York City is being told to return about $106 million in money from FEMA that we were told was never really there, but apparently was. And this was given to them to use for illegal immigrants. The federal government now wants that money back. The Blaze said this. It said the Trump administration's Federal Emergency Management Agency has warned New York City that it plans this month to take back another $106 million in federal funds that the city received under former President Joe Biden to address the ongoing illegal immigration crisis. This is your free food and free housing fund for illegal immigrants. Now, it notes, in February, President Donald Trump demanded that New York City return more than $80 million in immigration-related funding, like the money for the free hotel rooms. It says the action prompted Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat, to take, now an independent by the way, to take legal action against the administration, which remains ongoing. And they say, quote, like their previous action, clawing back appropriated funds, these steps are unlawful. And the New York City Law Department is currently determining the best legal recourse to take to ensure that this money remains in New York City where it was allocated and belongs, Adams stated. And he said, quote, as I have repeatedly said, New York City did not create this crisis. It was caused by decades of federal inaction and failure to pass comprehensive immigration reform, he added. And notes that Adams has contended that the city's taxpayers alone should not have to bear the burden of the immigration crisis created by the Biden administration. He called the FEMA funds, quote, the bare minimum our taxpayers deserve. And it adds further in the court filing, Adams claimed the move had no lawful grounds, demanding that it be reversed and the administration be prevented from conducting further, quote, unlawful money grabs in the future. Adams stated that he will take further legal action against the Trump administration's latest attempt to recoup another $106 million. And it's according to the New York Times, the funds have already been spent. Now, the other side of it, of course, is that Donald Trump and his administration, the DHS, revoked the legal status of every single person who came into the country using the CBP One app and is basically saying you've been giving money to people who are not here legally and they should be deported, not be put up in five-star hotels. That's the argument from the Trump side. And they're saying basically you've been spending American tax dollars to carry out what is effectively illegal activity. You're housing, right, holding people who are in violation of American law and should be deported. That's the argument, right? Now look, this does look pretty bad because You might remember. During the 2024 elections, what happened? Hurricane Helene devastated several states, especially North Carolina. There were reports that FEMA, emergency response, the one we're told is there to help us in case of an emergency, they did not have enough money to manage disasters. They were saying they were having budget issues. And so the question was, where did their budget go? Where did all that money we gave to FEMA go? And many said the money was going to illegal immigrants. And now, look, that was denied. They said that was not the case. It was a giant conspiracy theory. And if you believe it, you are believing disinformation. You're a dragon believer. And it turned out the truth was somewhere in the middle. FEMA was shelling out money for states to give to illegal immigrants, free food, free housing, other programs like this. They were in fact doing it. And the technicality, right, the little thing they were using to say it was all fake, it was technically a separate budget from disaster relief. That was the technicality. And so the arguments, saying the money was being diverted from Americans facing disaster, that was the grounds they used to say everybody was a conspiracy theorist on. It was a different delegated budget, but it was through FEMA. Now, on to another topic, though. You might have seen the chart showing that egg prices went down. And if you're like me, you might have also noticed that egg prices have not actually gone down in many supermarkets. The prices went down, but they didn't, right? And apparently, look, the United States did manage to cut the costs. And some companies just decided to not cut the costs, and they were pocketing all that additional money. They kept the prices high because we're willing to pay it. Now, the Department of Justice is investigating at least one of these companies in particular on the grounds that its earnings somehow show more than they doubled since last year. They got double the profits while claiming there was a supply shortage, while we've all just been told that this is a shortage, not a pricing issue. Epoch Times says this. It says, Cal-Maine Foods, Inc., the nation's largest egg producer, on Tuesday acknowledged that it is being investigated by the Department of Justice's Antitrust Division over the national increase in egg prices. It says the brief admission in its newest financial report made headlines and the company's shares fell by about 4% in after-hours trading. And they said, quote, in March 2025, the company received a civil investigative demand in connection with a widely publicized investigation by the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice into the causes behind nationwide increases in egg prices, Cal-Maine said in its financial report for its third quarter on Tuesday. And they said, quote, the company is cooperating with the investigation. Now, note that egg prices have hit record highs in the recent months, largely due to a bird flu epidemic that has forced farmers to slaughter more than 166 million birds, mostly egg-laying chickens. And they were not replacing them as they, again, killed them. It notes that 1 dozen grade A eggs cost an average of $5.50 in U.S. cities in February, up 10.4% from a year ago. I've seen the prices much higher than that personally. And notes that eclipses January's record high price of $4.95. And notes the Ridgeland, Mississippi-based Cal-Maine accounts for roughly 20% of the nation's egg supply. And further it says, commenting on the results, Cal-Maine President and CEO Sherman Miller said dynamic market conditions which led to record high egg prices and bird flu-related shortages persisted throughout the quarter. It says Miller said that despite the challenging supply environment, the company was able to benefit from its existing size plus recent acquisitions to increase capacity and made a lot of money, right? And it notes this, quote, he said, above all, we stayed focused on meeting the needs of our valued customers while honoring our long-standing pricing frameworks, he said in a statement. Now look, the egg price issue has been a big one. Donald Trump has been celebrating his efforts to bring the prices of eggs down. A lot of that is because of foreign deals. They brought in eggs. He also made a national emergency on it. They're spending $1 billion on it. And as I've seen, at least, the prices of eggs have not actually gone down. The efforts are not being reflected on the storefronts. And so the big question is, well, what are the companies doing where they're not lowering the price of eggs when the supply issue that justified the whole thing has been resolved? Why have they kept the prices of eggs high even though the issue is no longer there? And if their profits doubled, well, what's the cause of that? Who knows, right? This is where the investigation is right now. Now, look, in some other news, there were reports which apparently had been hidden from the American people from 2022, and these show that U.S. troops may have gotten infected with COVID-19 when they were in Wuhan, China, back in 2019, right at the start of the whole thing. I'll be talking more about this after coming back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. It's now being revealed that reports that could have showed the real origin of COVID-19 have been concealed from the American people, and now they're becoming public. And one of these, it was a report apparently that had been hidden from us from 2022, and it shows that American troops, our soldiers, may have gotten infected with COVID-19 when they were in Wuhan, China back in 2019. The Daily Wire said this. It said the December 2022 report from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense and Personnel and Readiness examined, quote, the number of United States athletes and staff who attended the 2019 World Military Games and became ill with coronavirus disease 2019 COVID-19-like symptoms during or shortly after their return to the United States. And it added, quote, the Department of Defense has concluded through correspondence with the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and United States of America Director in charge of the safety and health of the participants in the 2019 World Military Games that 7 service members who attended the Games exhibited COVID-19-like signs and or symptoms during the time frame of October 18, 2019 through January 21, 2020. And it adds the COVID-19-like symptoms could have been caused by other respiratory infections because they had no way to test at that time. And they add all 7 service members resolved within 6 days. They also add the December 2022 report, which the Biden administration was required by law to release to the public over 2 years ago but did not, reveals for the first time that 7 U.S. military service members contracted COVID-19-like symptoms during or after their participation in the World Military Games in Wuhan in October 2019, contradicting the Biden administration's public claims in 2021 that there was no evidence that any Americans participated, contracted the virus at those games. The Washington Free Beacon, which broke the story, noted. And it also added, quote, the revelation adds to a mounting body of evidence that the virus was circulating in Wuhan for months before China disclosed it to the world in December 2019, and further bolsters the growing consensus that it could have leaked into the human population from a Chinese lab. Now it adds, the report was not made public until last month, when the Trump administration uploaded it to the Department of Defense website. Now that's a big deal, and why? The CCP was trying to use that for its own propaganda. They were saying, right, the CCP, in their propaganda, when there were calls for investigations of the origin of COVID, they launched their own campaign, and they were saying that America spread it. They were saying it came from American troops, that they brought COVID to China. And on the other side, there were concerns that it was the opposite. There were concerns that the CCP basically used this as a bioweapon against our troops when they were in China. There were concerns the CCP may have intentionally infected American troops with the intent of spreading COVID-19 abroad. And look, that was the debate. We were prevented from having the real information on that debate because a report that was legally supposed to be released was not. And this raises a lot of questions. Mainly, look, did the CCP intentionally do this? That was also one of the big suspicions, by the way, when some of us were actually reporting on these types of things and basically being censored for reporting what we now know was the truth. It seems unfortunate, actually. The whole infodemic, the information pandemic that was declared by the World Health Organization under the pandemic, it was actually suppressing a lot of actual, real information. They were suppressing real information and they were promoting fake information to everybody. And those of us who were reporting all the real stuff, we got censored, we got attacked for telling the truth. But look, finally, a lot of information is now coming out, and I assume we're going to be seeing, frankly, a whole lot more of it. Now, in other news, folks, the Trump administration is moving to close down the Community Relations Service of the Department of Justice. And what is that? Well, that service played various roles with Black Lives Matter, civil rights organizations, also the riots in Ferguson. It was created during the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It's basically been framed as a group of, activists and community organizers that has deeply partisan implications. Now, on one side, they're saying this was about protecting the rights of Americans. On the other side, they're saying this was effectively a state-funded operation to fuel the flames of racial tensions. Believe which side you want. Front Page Magazine said this. It said Ferguson was the ground zero for the BLM movement that destroyed public safety and the race riots that wrecked out cities and led to a wave of radical pro-crime policies that killed thousands. While Ferguson may be in the rearview mirror for many, the Trump administration is moving to shut down the Community Relations Service that was at the heart of it. They say a little flashback. The Justice Department, quote, sent in its secretive Community Relations Service, all but indistinguishable from a group of community organizers, to train protesters and provide liaison services for them. These so-called, quote, peacemakers wear the blue windbreakers, polo shirts, and dark sunglasses of federal agents, but claim to be the eyes and ears of the community. Right? Which community? It says eyes, ears, but not the mouths. They just organize things and let other people do their work. It notes the CRS organizers were ordered not to talk to the media about what they were doing. Interesting. It says that Obama announced at the time that, quote, we've also had experts from the DOJ's Community Relations Service working in Ferguson since the days after the shooting of foster conversations among local stakeholders and reduce tensions among the community. It adds the secretive experts in question seem to be geared at worsening the situation and not improving it. They seem to have wanted those race riots for some reason. And it adds, quote, but now the Trump administration is trying to put this community organized arm of the DOJ to bed and fire them. Now, notes also, basically CBS News, they also reported on this. They said the agency is now set up to be purged by the Trump administration. And it notes, quote, an internal Justice Department memo reviewed by CBS News said Trump appointees are considering, maybe not absolutely, but considering closing the Community Relations Service, which they say was created as part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The mission of the office is to be America's peacemakers, tasked with preventing and resolving racial tensions and ethnic tensions, conflicts, and civil disorders, and in restoring racial stability and harmony. And apparently that can be interpreted in a lot of ways, including training people who are going and burning down cities. It also adds that, quote, the office has a history of intervening during periods of heightened national unrest. It was credited with helping prevent another riot in 1993 as racial tensions reemerged following the second trial of police who beat Rodney King in California. Now, the Trump administration has purged a lot of agencies and departments. They're not for sure going to get rid of this one. Again, it's rumored, it's being considered. And look, this is just another example of that, I'd say. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Do you think this needs to be reviewed? Do you think they should get rid of it? Right? Or do you think Trump has already done enough? Do you think he's already gotten rid of enough of our federal government? Also, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps us a lot. Share this episode. Let's jump into some questions. All right, first question here. Gina Mikulik, you're saying, how scary it is that China makes or provides the raw materials for our critical medicines. Yeah, you know, that is one of the big issues with China. We don't actually need them for most stuff. Like, honestly, like what is your made in China stuff? It's a bunch of garbage for the most part. Anything of value usually comes from somewhere else, or you can get it from somewhere else. But the real challenge is a lot of the raw materials. Now, there's two sides to this. On one side, we have been, as a country, very much overly dependent on China for a lot of this stuff. Part of it is because, you know, they undercut global markets. It's a lot of state-subsidized companies. They steal intellectual property, which means they don't have to pay R&D, which is a lot of your budget. They just steal it. And so they're able to bid below the cost, usually, of what even people would pay at their baseline. Because of that, they shut down a lot of competition. It has been effectively impossible for companies to compete with many Chinese companies in these areas. And so what happened? Let's say you have a big operation to, let's say, mine rare earth minerals, right? Great example. Or create some of the key ingredients for medicines you need, like blood thinners you might need for an operation, for example. What happens? You make this company, maybe you can barely compete with Chinese prices, and then that state-subsidized Chinese company lowers their cost, so nobody buys your thing because you can't compete. You go out of business, they get their monopoly back, and they rise their prices again. The CCP has maintained a monopoly in many key areas because of these types of trade tactics. And look, a lot of businessmen who go to China know the dirty tricks they play. A lot of businessmen going to China know that, you know, it's not the best environment. In fact, a lot of the reason why businesses are pulling out of China is not really because of cost or, you know, there's better deals elsewhere. It's because of the way the CCP treats them. It's because of the way the Chinese business works. You have the most backstabbing form of businessmen you will ever encounter in your life in China. I have a good friend, by the way, who went to business school in China. He's a second-generation Chinese, but he went to business school in China. And he said at the business school, they had a mural on the wall of all these guys in suits, and they're like competing with each other. They're trying to reach this goal at the top of this like mountain, and they're like stepping on each other's faces and like shoving each other down. This is the mural in the business school. And basically what the message being sent by this mural is that you need to crush your competition if you're going to succeed. And that is the message they instill in their businessmen in China. That is how they do business. It's hook and crook and kill your competitors. Do everything you can to succeed. That is what they teach them. And that's what the CCP even helps them do through state subsidies, IP theft, and all the manipulation of these bad deals and loopholes. And they've really been allowed to do this. The other big thing, this is gonna screw a lot of these Chinese companies over, guarantee it. This is the big gun. If Trump wanted to absolutely nuke the Chinese economy, aside from talking about human rights, this is what he could do. The Chinese Communist Party blocks investigations into many of its publicly traded companies. Some of you know out there, if you're in business or you know somebody does business, if you're going to be a publicly listed company, you have to be audited. There are requirements for transparency and audits that are a condition for you being publicly listed. The Chinese Communist Party blocks that for their companies. And so you have Chinese companies publicly listed that are not held to the same rules that everybody else is. Now, they have actually investigated some of these companies. You know what happens almost every single time? Almost every single time a Chinese company is audited, they find it was lying about its numbers. They find it was a Ponzi scheme. They find that they were lying to their investors. They find the whole thing was a fraud, and usually the company goes out of business. That's happened many times. Almost every time they actually audit a Chinese company, that is discovered. Because again, it's all like backstabbing, hook and crook type stuff. That's how they do business. It's just how they do business. And when they go to like third world countries and things like that, it's all bribery. They'll have half their budget just for bribes. And so they'll pay people off to make bad deals. Like imagine you're making a deal with like an African country. And I'll give you a real example so I'm not exaggerating. The Chinese companies will go to these different countries' leaders, and let's say you need to, who's the decision maker? Maybe the Secretary of Commerce, maybe the president, maybe a certain key guy within the business. They'll go to that guy, and half their budget will be for bribes. They actually have some great reporting on this. There's one thing they do in Africa. They call it castle diplomacy. Castle diplomacy. Because they literally build castles and give these people like mansions as a bribe. And so you have these like African officials who have sold out their entire countries on the worst trade deals and then made out like bandits. They get rich and their entire country gets screwed over by the CCP. That happens on a massive scale. They do the same thing in Asia. They try to do the same thing in the US and Europe and so on too. And you do have a lot of people who are in the pocket of the CCP because of this. They even do it on the individual level. They do it to journalists, they do it to influencers, YouTubers, TikTokers. They do it to politicians, they do it to everybody they can. Because this is how they do business. If you wanted to nuke the Chinese economy, all you got to do is audit their companies. Simple, right? I don't think they have much of a chance when it comes to this. But on that point too, back to Gina Mikulik's point, we do unfortunately have some products that we kind of need them for right now. Key ingredients for medications is one of them. There are alternative markets for that, but the issue for the most part is capacity. I know that, for example, India, you can buy a lot of those same ingredients from India. And then also with rare earth materials, right, rare earth minerals and so on, they also need to build alternative sources of those. A lot of it is more just scale. There are alternative sources for like base needs, but not for the entire industrial scale that you would need to cut them out entirely. And so I do think that's all being developed right now. Let's see, Ashley from California, you're saying it's kind of funny that ask the things China has announced they will do in retaliation. They were already doing, now they're just saying it out loud. Well, that's the funny thing too, is the CCP was already exploiting a lot of these trade deals. And this is my point. All right, folks, spectrum of trade, right? A lot of trade deals are made in the middle. If you're making a mutually beneficial deal, you're doing it in the middle. The CCP, for decades, has been exploiting everything. And I'm not exaggerating. If there's a loophole, they exploit it. If there's a law, they exploit it. If there's a monopoly or something else, they exploit it. Currency manipulation, they use their military to steal designs. They manipulate even intellectual property registrations like IP laws and sue people using the thing they stole from them in some cases. They use mineral deals and bribery and backdoor stuff. They kill people. If you especially go to the third world, a lot of the Chinese businessmen, they're 1 inch away from being the mafia. They work like the mafia. And so if your entire economy can still, with every drop of exploitation you can possibly commit, still barely scrape by, which is where the Chinese economy is right now, because you have a lot of corrupt officials and corrupt businessmen. And what do? Every time there's profit, every time there's money coming through, every single one of them takes a little bit of cream off the top. If the CCP delegates $10 million for something, by the time it gets through every corrupt official and every corrupt leader of the businesses and every corrupt individual and gets down to the bottom, you have maybe like 1/10 of what they delegated left because they are that corrupt. This is why when they raid the homes of public officials, they will literally find, and there have been real cases of this, You have these public officials, and they will have an entire house, and the entire house is filled with stacks of money because they've been stealing money through embezzlement. The level of corruption is beyond what many people could possibly imagine. The degree of corruption is horrid. And again, I'd say it's because a lot of them, their god is money. They literally worship money, or the CCP. Again, they've actually enshrined a god of money in China. It's not a traditional thing. This is a CCP thing. Guangdong, the god of money. They literally pray to money. They worship money, and they act like they worship money. They're some of the most corrupt businessmen in the face of the planet. And so that point is, if that's your baseline, every drop of exploitation, abusing every system you can, what happens when the laws start getting enforced? What happens when this is pushed back to here, even a middle ground, let alone a point of advantage for the rest of the world? It means the CCP's economy depends on exploitation. They've gotten to a point where they cannot survive without exploiting everything. And so if you roll that back, if even you get to the point where you make even a normal bad deal with them and you lose out a bit, they will not survive economically, because they have globally, not even just with the US, globally, they've become so dependent on just taking advantage of everyone that is their baseline. Massive exploitation is their baseline, not even like the profit margin. And so I don't think they're going to survive it. Let's see here. Candace Harden is saying, I love a trade war with China, but a lot of businesses are going to suffer as their supply chain costs just went up massively. Hope everyone can scramble and get similar from India or Taiwan. That is partly true. You have a lot of companies that have become deeply reliant on the Chinese market. But the important part is what has been happening over the last, 6 years? What has been happening since about 2019? Well, thanks, COVID. Thank you, COVID. What has happened since 2019 is that because the CCP kept shutting down global shipping, and because the CCP became a lot more aggressive inside China, what has the narrative been? De-risking. Remember, we've been talking about this on the show, de-risking. What does de-risking mean? It means that companies have already been pulling out of China. A huge number of them have already done so. A lot. Look, George Soros was telling BlackRock to divest from China. George Soros was telling BlackRock to divest from China because he saw the writing on the wall. Many companies, and this wasn't even a price thing a lot of times, it was a CCP. The government's becoming even more authoritarian. It's actually gotten worse somehow. I didn't know it could get worse. It's very hard to be a foreign business person in China now. And so because they did that, they pushed a lot of businesses, a lot of factories, a lot of supply chains already out of China. And you can see it in the market. Remember, I've been talking about it for a long time. Again, you have the real estate crisis happening there. The real estate industry is about a third of their economy being decimated. Manufacturing, about another third of their economy being decimated. And then just local industry, which is also suffering. Many people already left. And they've been going to, Vietnam, they've been going to Mexico, and they've been going to Taiwan a little bit. They've been going to India, very much so, Indonesia, other countries. They've already been leaving the China market. Now, to that point, it is not everybody. It's definitely not everyone. You still have a lot of businesses tied in with there. But because there's been this pattern of, again, de-risking, and that's the narrative they've used for the last 6 years, this has been going on for 6 years. Because of that de-risking that took place, many companies have already gotten to a point where they can relatively survive without the need of China. They've already gotten out of a point where this would be detrimental to us. And remember, I've been saying this. I've been saying that they need to get out, they need to decouple or de-risk, whatever you want to call it, because when the Chinese economy goes down, they're going to go down with it if they're still there. And here we are. The day has arrived, right? Denise B., you're saying, so with Trump's comments about now is a good time to buy, etc., is there going to be a bunch of liberal lawyers bringing charges against him for insider trading? Denise, you're an oracle because they've already done it. Yeah, they're already talking about it. So again, you know, Trump, what did he do? He made two posts on Truth Social. His first post was, now is a good time to buy, DJT, right, Donald J. Trump. And then what did he do? He made his big announcement that, you know, he was going to basically put everything on hold and then wage a trade war with China. And what happened? Well, the stock markets went from kind of struggling to just absolutely skyrocketing. And so anybody who took Trump's financial advice, which you could consider it, now is a good time to buy, they probably made a lot of money. And the challenge is you could, you know, there are arguments and there are people already investigating Trump for this. There are arguments that was financial advice of a looming insider plan on trade. And so he's already facing investigations on that, as you might expect. That only happened yesterday, and so we'll probably see what they end up doing with it. But yeah, of course they're going to go after him, right? I don't think Trump even really cares at this point, to be honest, but they're already going after him on that. So yeah, it is happening. Ashley from California, you're saying China has a new way of getting organs since they're running low on prisoners to steal organs from. They label people in the hospital as brain dead. They have no actual definition of what brain dead means either. I've heard stories of this, really terrible stories of it. Yeah, so the CCP, of course, they created a business, the Chinese Communist Party created a business of organ harvesting. Now, this started with prisoners of conscience. They were killing, for example, Falun Gong practitioners. They were killing Muslim Uyghurs. They were killing the people who, you know, they were imprisoning because they believe in a religion that the CCP does not allow. Or you're part of a targeted ethnic group. Inner Mongolians, Tibetan Buddhists, you know, the Muslim Uyghurs are also from Xinjiang or East Turkestan. They're also deemed as like an unwanted class, and so they kill them. They murder them for their organs. Now, the issue with the CCP, a lot of that's actually run through the Chinese military. Again, look, Epoch Times, we broke the initial stories on this. We broke the first stories on this. A lot of that goes to the Chinese military hospitals. And what's actually interesting in China, and not a lot of people know this, the Chinese military has to make its own money. Listen, this is crazy, actually. I don't think I've mentioned this before. They don't actually delegate the full budget to the Chinese military. And so the Chinese military has to run its own businesses to make money. Now, they've loosened it somewhat. Part of that goes back to Mao-era policies, where basically every company and every single business in China used to be run by the military. That was until Deng Xiaoping and the reforms in opening up. They created the State Council, which is kind of the pseudo-government of China, and the State Council, which is still under the CCP. They basically started running all the businesses. So the state-run businesses in China are under the State Council. But the CCP, basically, they still run that. And the Chinese military is basically just the armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party. It's not to protect the Constitution. It's not to protect the people. Its sole mission is to protect the Communist Party. And so it's more like the armed thugs of a mafia, right? Is the way it really works. And so the thing is, they have to make money. They're not totally, the CCP does provide a lot of their funding now, but not all of it. They have to make money. And so the military in China has to get involved in business. Live organ harvesting, where they take people while they're still alive and they cut their organs out. They even take the skin. They take the corneas from the eyes, they take the skin, they skin people. They skin people alive. I'm not even exaggerating. They skin them alive, they take their organs, everything, and this is business for them. They've created a large-scale global business of organ transplants using that, and that is that ties into their military budget. Now, what happens when you don't have enough dissidents to, murder and take organs from? You need to find other people. Or if you build a business and you want to grow your business, what do? Well, that's when you start going to hospitals. That's when you start snatching people off the streets and harvesting their organs. That's when you start finding any excuse to grow your business, which is the murder and extraction of organs of just random people. And so, this is the CCP. That's the CCP for you. They do that kind of stuff. Horrifying stuff, right? In my opinion, that alone should have been a big enough reason for us to never want anything to do with the Chinese Communist Party. That alone should have prevented any business from taking place with China. Because look, there are countries that still even allow organ tourism to China while they know that the CCP gets those organs from killing people. And also one of the reasons you have on this, they don't really have an organ donation program in China. In the West, some of you know that, if you go and register for, if you get a driver's license, you have to write or check the box saying that you will become an organ donor if you're brain dead. I did not check it because, my dad told me not to, because he's like, look, you might be kind of like on the edge. If you get in a car accident, you might live. And if you check that box, they might say, you're more valuable dead than alive. So I didn't check it, but I know a lot of people do. And I know people, their lives are saved through organ transplants. Fair enough. Outside of China, most countries have an organ donation program. In China, they don't. And this is the problem they have. In Chinese traditional belief, they don't, desecrating a dead body is really not something they do. They believe that keeping the body whole after death is very important for burial, for everything. If you read a lot of old Chinese books, one of my favorites, Outlaws of the Marsh, if they're going to execute someone, the person usually does not beg for their life. They beg to not have their bodies desecrated. But the desecration of a body is really, it's like one of the worst things you can do to a person in traditional Chinese belief. Because they believe that the state of the body will actually impact the spirit of the person after death. So you cut off an arm, the spirit's going to be missing an arm. That's what they believe, right? And so because of that, they do not let people harvest their organs, even if they're dead. Even if they're dead, they're not going to want their organs taken out. And so you don't really have people donating their organs. And that's why the CCP created this whole business around killing people, just murdering people for their organs. Horrible stuff, right? Michael Kolovovsky, you're saying the fact so many facets of U.S. production depend on chips, you mean like semiconductors, of course, should prioritize their domestic production. What's actually not really talked about with chips is, Taiwan, TSMC, Taiwanese Semiconductor, they manufacture a lot of the best chips. You also have, for example, South Korean companies. I think Samsung does it. In the U.S., you have NVIDIA, right? We manufacture chips right here. What's not really talked about, a lot of the chips depend on certain types of equipment. America provides that equipment. The United States actually gave a lot of these businesses to those countries. We gave to Taiwan that capability. That comes from the United States. And so we actually have it. The United States could very easily replace them if we wanted to. But because they have the factories, they have the expertise, they've built a business where they've made it work, working with them means we don't have to do it ourselves. And so They are talking about building a big TSMC factory right here in the United States, which means that if the CCP invades Taiwan or blockades it, we do not lose our supply of chips. Very important, right? This is also why Trump is putting big business right now behind NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA is a domestic American company, and they also make semiconductors. They make some of the best ones. And so that is in the works. To that point, some of you may have seen articles saying that the Chinese Communist Party leaked war plans, leaked intelligence from the U.S. They're saying the Chinese Communist Party is planning to invade, encircle Taiwan within the next few months. That might happen, but it might not happen, and here's why. Two things. One, Xi Jinping is having a power struggle with his own military right now. Xi Jinping does not have full control over the Chinese military. A very important thing. And so even if Xi Jinping wants to do this, the military might not listen to him. And that's a dangerous situation for Xi. On that point, Xi Jinping would probably want a war, because what happens when your military is against you? What's the easiest way to solve that problem? Well, you get them killed and then you replace them, right? And so getting the military killed and then replacing them with new recruits or whatever else would be in Xi Jinping's interest. And what better way to do it than a war? What better way to do it than send them across the very shallow waters of the Taiwan Strait, where you're going to have like Saving Private Ryan type entrenchments, shooting them so far out with modern weaponry that they can't even see the shore. It would be absolutely devastating to them. I mean, I don't think people understand how devastating that would be to the Chinese military. But if your economy is dying, if the survival of the regime is at stake, and if your military does not listen to you and you're fighting with them, you might want a war. And so they might try it. But the wild card in that is they might not listen. They might not listen to Xi Jinping. And some of the purges that have happened, there's a lot of infighting right now. The military has actually managed to purge some of the loyalists to Xi Jinping. And so they're kind of fighting back against Xi, even within the military. It's a very complicated situation. And the other side, too, is that the trade war right now may delay that plan. The trade war right now may delay that because Xi Jinping is focused on that now. And that means also they're going to have to pull all their active measures and assets in every country on the face of the planet to try to make their puppets, work within those countries to have them join China to fight the U.S., which they might not be able to do because a lot of countries would choose the U.S. over China if it came down to pick one or the other. Most countries will pick the U.S. Ray and Sue, you're saying, I haven't noticed that chicken prices are up that much, are they? You would think that chicken prices would be through the roof, wouldn't you? I tend to shop at Trader Joe's. It's the closest one to my house. The last few times I went, they did not even have chicken. I don't know if this is just a New Jersey thing. I live in Jersey. I don't know if this is just a New Jersey thing, but I literally have not even seen chicken for sale at my local store. And the way it's been with eggs is if you want to buy eggs, you have to kind of go the day they receive the shipments because they sell out. Now, I don't know if that's been fixed, maybe not. From what I understand, also it depends on the source of the chicken. Trader Joe's, they get the more natural stuff. And I don't know, maybe supplies of that are just shorter. A lot of the cheaper stuff, the other stuff, the bioengineered stuff, I don't know. Maybe those are more easy to get, so maybe those are there. But I personally haven't seen it, so I don't know. But on that point, they have been working to resolve this issue. Trump did put $1 billion into it, but it does seem the market's still being squeezed, so who knows. All right, folks, that said, it is Thursday, so I will see you tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please give this video a like. It actually does help us a lot in the algorithm, so do not forget to like this video. It does help us. That said, share this episode, help us get the word out, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.